जय शंकर. आजच्या कार्यक्रम आम्ही सभा प्रारंभ प्रार्थनेन सुरुवात करूया. दक्षिणास्य समारंभा शंकराचार्य मध्यमा अस्मदाचार्य पर्यंता स्मर्या गुरुपरंपरा. श्रुतिस्मृति पुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शंकरल्लोकशंकरं. शंकरं शंकराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः. ईश्वरो गुरुरात्मेति मूर्तिभेदविभागिने व्योमवद्व्याप्तदेहाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः. परिज्ञानाश्रम श्रीगुरुशङ्कर परिज्ञानाश्रम शङ्कर सद्गुरु केशव वामन कृष्ण पाण्डुरङ्ग आनंद परिज्ञान गुरु सद्यो जात शंकर सद्गुरु. गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः. ओम सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै. ओम शांति शांति शांति. Jai Shankar. Welcome everyone to the physio session titled Unlock Your Joints Before They Get on Your Nerves. Before we start the proceedings for the day, I would like to invite Dr. Chaitanya Ma'am to talk to us about the ongoing Atmabal series during the Sayujam event. Chaitanya Ma'am.
ओम श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः. श्री भवानी शंकराय नमः. श्री मात्रे नमः. आमगेल ह्या 6व्या आत्मबल सेशनाक तुमकां सर्वांक हांव सहर्ष स्वागत करता. ह्या सेशन अनलॉक योर जॉइंट्स बिफोर दे गेट ऑन योर नर्व्स is a physiotherapy session. The importance of physiotherapy cannot be less emphasized. It begins with the pregnancy, then the cradle, and goes on to the adult life. The youth of today, excelling in various sports, are susceptible to injuries which need physiotherapy. With the entry of electronic gadgets into our lives and our occupations, with mobiles, laptops, and all others, the number of ergonomic disorders is growing steadily, and physiotherapy is the only refuge. As we grow older, the role of physiotherapy only increases with weaker joints and muscles. Many a risky surgery can be avoided with simple physiotherapy. And of course, physiotherapy comes to aid, more importantly, even post-surgery, after the surgery, to get us back into action. To discuss more about physiotherapy, we have with us today a very eminent panel of well-qualified physiotherapists. The session will be moderated by Dr. Niyati Putli. To introduce Dr. Niyati Putli, she completed her undergraduate studies in physiotherapy from the Somaiya College of Physiotherapy, Mumbai, and then went on to do post-graduation in neurophysiotherapy from the same institute. She is now certified in neurodevelopmental therapy in adults and level 2 in proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. She is presently a consultant neurotherapist at the prestigious Kokilabhen Dhirubhai Ambani Hospital in Andheri, Mumbai. Over to you, Niyati.
Thank you, Chaitanya Ma'am, for the kind introduction. The past few years, life as we know it has changed drastically. Now, the much ignored concept of preventive healthcare has been pushed to the forefront once again. Now, physiotherapy is a healthcare profession that involves not just restorative and compensatory methods of gaining functionality, but is a major proponent of preventive healthcare strategies as well. In today's session, our esteemed panel of speakers will try to clear some common doubts regarding conditions and give an insight to how physiotherapy can prevent or delay their occurrence Let me now introduce you our panelist for today. Our first panelist is Dr. Swati Putli. She was born and brought up in Mumbai. She completed her graduation from the esteemed GS Medical College. She worked in Breach Candy for 6 years, post which she relocated to Singapore. In Singapore, she worked with Rehab Asia for 4 years. She later returned to India and rejoined as a senior executive physiotherapist in Breach Candy. She has been attached to the KSA Health Center for the past 25 years. She is currently focused on her private practice and attached to many hospitals. She resides in Mumbai with her husband and 2 sons. Our second panelist for the day is Dr. Divya Bizur. She has done her bachelor's from Sikkim Manipal University. She has also a certification in orthopedic manual therapy from the Curtin University, Adelaide. She has completed her fellowship in orthopedic rehabilitation from Hyderabad. Since 2010, she runs 2 physiotherapy clinics in Vasai. Divya keeps herself updated with seminars, workshops, and webinars. She is a Sangeet Visharad and loves to learn songs of different languages and explore different forms of music. I am sure our experienced panelists today will share with us some useful tips in the session. Now let me start by addressing my first question to Dr. Divya. Dr. Divya, osteoarthritis is a commonly occurring condition among many individuals. What is it exactly? Is it only found in the knees? And is there any way in which its onset can be delayed or completely avoided? In case a person is diagnosed with it, how can it be managed? Over to you.
Thank you. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha, Shri Bhavani Shankaraya Namaha, Shri Matre Namaha, Sarvanka Jai Shankar. And thank you, Dr. Niyati, for this question, because nowadays so many people are diagnosed with an osteoarthritis diagnosis, and I'm sure it's a big apprehension for everyone. So let's alleviate some of the apprehensions today. Osteoarthritis is basically a wear and tear of joints as we age. And this happens because the lubrication between the 2 bone surfaces that join together starts depleting or reducing as we age. And that's why it goes on in stages. So as we can see, these are the stages of osteoarthritis. It commonly occurs in the knee, as Dr. Niyati said. Of course, not only in the knee, but in India, it's commonly seen in the knees. This is osteoarthritis of the hip. So osteoarthritis happens in weight-bearing joints. And just like the hinges of our doors start creaking when they are devoid of lubrication, our joints start reacting when lubrication starts reducing. This is OA ankle. Not very common, but yeah, it is seen. Yeah, this is the osteoarthritis of fingers. So in fingers, it is also seen because we do a lot of intricate jobs with our fingers. Now, there were a few more questions that I would like to address. Can the onset be delayed? Yes, it can certainly be delayed. If we work on muscles around our joints, if we strengthen our joints and the bones around our joints, it can certainly be delayed. Now, can it be avoided? I wish I could say that, yes, it can be avoided. But, it's just like none of us like to grow old. We would not like to have osteoarthritic joints. But just like aging and time wait for none, it is inevitable. But the good news is that the suffering can be prevented. So the first tip I would like to give all of my listeners is that never ignore your pain. If you feel pain and if it is like 3-4 days old and it is not subsiding, then please seek assistance. Because pain is like an alarm signal. Your body is alerting you to something that's, probably going wrong. So it's better you seek assistance from a medical professional. Now, once a diagnosis of osteoarthritis is made, there are the stages as we had seen on the slides. So it can be either mild, moderate, or severe. So mild or moderate osteoarthritis can be effectively managed by physiotherapy. The suffering can certainly be alleviated and the pain relief that is achieved can be maintained as far as the person is doing the necessary exercises regularly. Now, if it is severe, then a multidisciplinary team has to be involved, which can consist of an orthopedic surgeon. If the person needs weight reduction, then it can be a dietitian or a nutritionist. And of course, it would be a physiotherapist. So these are the few aspects that can be included in osteoarthritis. So Dr. Niyati, have I answered your questions?
Yes, Divya, thank you so much. That was very useful information. Now, my next question would be to Dr. Swati Pachi. So, Dr. Swati Pachi, could you elaborate on the pre and post-operative role of physiotherapy, and broadly, which are the conditions requiring for physiotherapy? For how long is this required? Dr. Swati Pachi, over to you.
Jai Shankar Sagranko. Thank you for the question, Niyati. Physiotherapy plays a very important role in a planned or an elective surgery. The surgery may be orthopedic, cardiothoracic, or abdominal. A physiotherapist's approach towards the patient is holistic. So it is not about treating only the injured part or the part to be operated. So when physiotherapy is started before surgery, it makes the patient mentally and physically strong so that they are in a position to help themselves after the surgery. Also, the exercises which are taught pre-operatively are similar to the ones the patient has to do after the surgery. So the patient knows exactly what to expect and there is no fear of the unknown. So as soon as the surgery is over, post-operatively, three very important exercises are started. One is ankle pumps, then deep breathing exercises, and also gentle bed mobility exercises. Now, in deep breathing exercises, we teach various kinds of exercises such as diaphragmatic or abdominal breathing, lateral costal breathing, and apical breathing. This is to ensure ventilation and air entry to all the lobes of the lungs. Ankle pumps, as simple as it may sound, is about moving feet up and down. The main aim of doing this every hour post-operatively is to maintain circulation in the lower limbs, because when a patient undergoes a surgery, he is advised rest for a few days. So while he is in the lying down or the horizontal position, we need to maintain circulation in the lower limbs. So when feet are moved up and down, there is a contraction and relaxation of the calf muscles. So that acts as a pump to push the venous blood back to the heart. Also, it prevents deep vein thrombosis, which means it prevents the formation of clots in the deep veins of the lower limb. And it prevents swelling of the feet, which is very common after surgery when bed rest is advised. So following surgeries such as total knee replacement or total hip replacement, we start early weight bearing. Walking is encouraged and allowed as soon as day 1 or sometimes day 2. Also, certain static and dynamic exercises are started to improve range of motion and muscle strength. Slowly, as the patient gets better, we start sitting at the edge of the bed exercises, and then it's gradually progressed. In certain conditions, certain fractures, following which a plate and screw are fixed or a bone graft is done, early weight bearing is not advised. So a patient has to wait for a few weeks and then start walking with the help of either walking aids like a walker or crutches or a cane or a stick. So it varies from condition to condition. So our main aim of starting post-operative physiotherapy early is to maintain circulation, improve the range of motion of joints, and to maintain cardiorespiratory fitness. Following a cardiothoracic surgery, the most important exercises are deep breathing exercises, incentive spirometry, and movements of the arm movements. This is mainly to improve lung capacity, air entry to the various lobes of the lungs, and to stimulate a cough reflex, which helps in easy expulsion of phlegm. A physiotherapist teaches the patient how to support the scar or the operated area and cough. Because after surgery, the cough reflex may be suppressed. There is also a fear of pain. So that is where a physiotherapist plays an important role in encouraging coughing and expulsion of secretions. Also, certain techniques such as clapping, vibrations, and percussions are given on the rib cage and the upper back to loosen any stubborn phlegm which may have accumulated in the lungs and is easily expelled. So, post-operatively, a physiotherapist plays a very important role to gradually progress the exercises, and ultimately, our aim is to make the patient start with his activities of daily living and lead an independent life. I hope that answers your questions, Niyati.
Thank you for the answers. That was a useful part of information. Now moving on, my next question would be to Divya. Now, Dr. Divya, changes associated with lifestyle and aging are an inevitable part of our life. Now, could you give us a few pointers towards attaining the goal of healthy living and aging with respect to physical health? Also, how can we improve our lung health and general fitness to lead a healthy lifestyle?
Thank you, Niyati. Yes, this is a very apt question and it is applicable to all of us at any point of time in life. We all know Arogyam Dhana Sampada. Health is wealth, and in fact, health is, I think, more than wealth. And we need everything for it. We need many things. We need nutrition. Of course, we need exercise, about which I'll be talking about a little more in detail. And we need activities for the health of the mind. And of course, sleep is also a very important aspect of health, of well-being. So I feel variety is the spice of life. So, the way we would like to have variety of foods. And of course, if food is like arranged in such a thali, kya kehna, nothing like it. And just like we love eating different varieties of foods every day, we won't like to eat the same food every day. Similarly, our body would love to have different forms of exercises, and that would strengthen the different elements of our body. So let's see what they are. Now, these are the types of exercises. Aerobic exercises are the ones in which our body utilizes a lot of oxygen. So like walking, swimming, running, etc. Depending on our body strength and our body condition, we can choose these. And these are also very good for the heart and lungs. Second thing is strengthening or weight bearing exercises. So this can be done by dumbbells or resistance bands or body weight. So when we do strengthening with body weight, it helps us to strengthen our bones and joints as well. And of course, when we strengthen ourselves with dumbbells and resistance bands, it helps us to tone our muscles. Balance training is also a very important aspect, like we do Tadasana, or we can even do one leg standing. So this basically strengthens our something called as our joint receptors, which helps us to build healthier ligaments. This can help us to avoid even ligament sprains. Flexibility exercises like yogasanas and general stretching would always have our muscles prepared and ready to turn our body in any direction we want without straining or injuring our muscles. Breathing exercises are also very vital because, as we know, every cell of our body requires oxygen, and breathing would ensure that we have our dose of oxygen. And of course, games and sports, which highlight the social aspect of our well-being, because there's the team spirit, and of course, even exercising in group is very good for even our emotional health. Now, let's go to some lung health aspects. Called abdominal, or like Swati Pachi was saying, diaphragmatic breathing, because the diaphragm, the muscle that is responsible for the main portion of our breathing, is actually active in this. So generally the way to do this is very simple and it is really very handy. So I would just like to elaborate a little on that. We can have one or both hands on our tummy to just feel how the tummy moves. So when we inhale through our nose, the tummy should come out, and when we exhale, we blow out through the mouth. The tummy should go inside. So this not just helps our lungs for oxygenation, it can also help us to focus a lot, and it can also help us to relieve a lot of our anxiety and stress. Let's look at some lung health tips. So first and foremost is we should be aware of our breathing. So keep breathing throughout the day, because whenever we get engrossed in work, we generally tend to hold our breath. So it's very important to be conscious of breath holding, because it would make us more tired and more irritable. So that's also very important. And even while exercising, to be conscious of breathing is really important, because in exercises like weight bearing, strength training, where we try to exert, we generally tend to hold our breath. And pranayam training from an expert. So I will not recommend, many times patients tell me that, oh, I saw this on YouTube and I was doing this and then I got injured. So I will not recommend, probably exercises we can use a bit of common sense and determine our fitness and start doing. But breathing exercises, I would recommend that you learn them from an expert, so that that person can, correct your mistakes and can avoid any hassles. Now, exercise, of course, has to be structured and disciplined, but sometimes it can be fun, like this Pachi is doing. Along with exercise, we need to have our dose of vitamin D to keep our bones and joints strong. So exercising in sunlight is very important. During sunrise or under the just risen sun, I would say. But of course, any point of time, if we feel that we are exercising and the sunshine is very bright, then I think we should wear goggles to protect our eyes. And of course, we should be boosting up on our oxygen reserves along with our breathing exercises. We should be exercising in the lap of nature sometimes. It's good to exercise in a gym, but of course, we should also be exercising outdoors as well. So, of course, exercising is very important, but yes, once in a while, and especially on the Halloween day, we can, both trick and treat our bodies, I think. But of course, everything in life has to be balanced. So even when we are exercising, we should start out gradually, we should progress carefully, and not exercise over enthusiastically. But many times when we start exercising, we get so engrossed in it and we feel that, oh, I want to do more, I want to do more. And not just exercising, but even our daily routine can cause us something called as overuse injuries. And we don't even come to know about it many times. So overuse injuries reminds me, Dr. Niyati, and I want to ask you a question on that. So can you tell our listeners what are overuse injuries? We have heard of athletes having injuries like tennis elbow. Are they common in the general population as well? Well, we as physios, we know that, every patient who walks into our clinic with a tennis elbow is not necessarily a tennis player. So could you explain us what are these overuse injuries? What is carpal tunnel syndrome, which is also an overuse injury? And is there any way of preventing it? Over to you, Dr. Niyati.
Thank you, Divya. So basically, Overuse injuries, also known as repetitive strain injuries, are those that are caused due to performing any activity in a repeated sequence. Now, our body is a dynamic structure and it is made to experience a range of activities under a range of different situations. Now, any repetition or stagnation in a particular range leads to excessive wear and tear. Now, this wear and tear is not restricted to a particular joint or muscle. This wear and tear occurs in all the related joints, muscles, ligaments, etc. involved in performing that particular activity. Now, due to work from home, there is increased restricted mobility. People are confined to their chairs and in one place for almost around 8 hours. Now, this static positioning can give rise to many aches and pains. And one of the most common issues is carpal tunnel syndrome. Now, what will an individual experience? A person will typically complain of weakness in the gripping muscles. There will be some numbness or tingling in the hand, especially at night, and the person will need to flick the wrist, giving a jerky movement and relieve the pain. Now, why does this happen? The carpal bones, basically these bones are packed very close together. They are surrounded by the forearm bones as well. And in between these two, there are a lot of structures like nerves, there is fluid. So any change in this tiny space leads to compression in the adjoining structures. Now, swelling in the wrist area due to overuse, fracture, pregnancy, or any medical condition is very common. Now, the median nerve, there is a nerve here which is responsible for gripping and the sensory part here. So this is most prone to compression in such symptoms. Now, how do you manage this? Like every condition, broadly, it can be managed conservatively, that is without surgery, and the next part is surgically. Initial assessment is important to identify which course of management to take place. So, conservative management basically includes a few points. The first important part is protecting the nerve. Now, how do we protect the nerve? Rest is not often the best. So often an individual needs to continue to work in that particular range. Now, what we do is splint the joint, that is relatively immobilize the joint in ranges which is causing that pain. As Divya mentioned, we should respect pain. So any position triggering that pain is avoided or supported. The next most important part is patient education and modification. Patient, an individual experiencing these symptoms, is basically educated regarding the cause, the root of that pain or root of that symptom, and modifications which are needed to relieve or control the symptoms. The next important part, this is mostly done by a physiotherapist. It is known as mobilization. Now, our entire body is like a web of interconnecting wires. Now, if we move one structure, the surrounding structures will move too. So just like our joints and bones, which can be mobilized, there is a mobilization technique for the nerve as well. Now, specific mobilization techniques are used by physiotherapists to glide these nerves. There are around 6 positions, specific positions, which help in mobilizing this particular median nerve. So this position is held from around 5 seconds to 30 seconds. And in these circumstances, the pain is not aggravated, but the pain is controlled or reduced. The next method will be to improve muscle performance. Now, when there is pain, usually the muscle range is maintained. Normal activities without increasing or aggravating the symptoms are done. Once the pain or symptoms are slightly under the control, we give strengthening exercises. So strengthening of muscles around the forearm, the entire shoulder, the core muscles, as well as strengthening of the grips and pinches is important. Lastly, functional independence. Now, how do we achieve that? We consider an individual functionally independent when the person is free of all the symptoms in the previously triggering positions. So that is functional independence. The next part is surgical management. So when conservative strategies don't work for a person and there is still continuation of the same repeated activity, we go for surgical management. Now, post-surgical management, the wrist is generally immobilized for around 7 to 10 days depending on the surgeon. Following this, there is intensive course of physiotherapy as mentioned previously. Now, moving on to tennis elbow. Tennis elbow has gained fame through many athletes. However, its occurrence is not restricted to them. Commonly, tennis elbow is found in computer professionals, homemakers, athletes, students, and nowadays even elderly due to mobile phone usage. The symptoms will be burning around your elbow, pain during wrist extension activities, example lifting something, lifting a heavy bag. Now, like the carpal tunnel syndrome, this too can be managed conservatively and surgically. But mostly tennis elbow is managed conservatively. So basically what is done is there are two forms of management. The initial goal is pain management and the next one is muscle function, retaining muscle function. Now in pain management, like previously mentioned, patient education is of utmost importance. We as therapists and the patient together combine to identify the positions of pain and the activities triggering that pain and the activities causing relief. Splinting, like previously, helps in relieving pain. The splint is tied around the elbow, just below the elbow, so as to support the extensor musculature. Now, icing is also a good method to help relieve pain. However, it is temporary and till the rest of the root cause is not solved of the pain, icing is just a temporary method. Neural tissue mobilization also help. The next one is retaining the muscle function. There are two ways. Now, when a person is still having acute symptoms, that is the person is in pain and cannot move the hand very well, that time we try and maintain the range of the muscles and the joints and we maintain flexibility. Now, when the pain and symptoms are slightly under the control, like previously mentioned, we start with the strengthening exercises. Now, these strengthening exercises are not isolated to specific muscle. However, we strengthen in various functional positions. Like it depends on the activity which you need to perform in your daily life. It depends on your occupation, and then in those ranges you are retrained. Now these injuries, although treatable, they are definitely avoidable in most cases. Since prevention is most definitely better than cure, my next question is addressed to Dr. Divya. Dr. Divya, could you tell us what entails a good posture? Can it contribute to preventing commonly occurring overuse injuries? And could you give a few pointers that a work from home audience can use to avoid any potential injuries? Over to you, Divya.
Yes, sure. So basically, posture is the position in which we hold our bodies when standing or sitting. So postures can be good and bad, and depending on what they are, they can enable us to, either lead a healthy life or, succumb to overuse injuries. So let's see a couple of good and bad postures. So these are some of the postures in different positions in which we can have either a bad or a corrected posture. These are a few more examples in which we can see how our posture can get faulty. Now, I remember when I was at school, my friends would actually slouch on top of the desk and, write. And back then, of course, I did not even know the P of physiotherapy. But when I started learning physiotherapy and when I started learning more about posture, I realized how important it was to actually inculcate this postural awareness right since schooling days, and nowadays we have online schools, we have schooling from home where we don't even have all the infrastructure for a good seating position, of course. But I think this has to be remembered and inculcated even in the children who are the future citizens so that we can have fit and strong citizens. This is for people who are working from home. So basically the monitor has to be at eye level. That is very important. And the keyboard has to be at the lap level or a little above that. The same goes to the mouse also, but the mouse has to be little closer. So generally what I have observed in my patients is they generally have the mouse on the table and they have to slouch to reach the mouse, So, and the height of the chair also becomes very important when we sit at a computer because we don't want to slouch. So we should sit back in the chair properly with our hips touching the backrest. And most important thing when we are sitting at a computer are our shoulders, because the shoulders bear the weight of the head and the neck, So we just have to remember a small tip, that a small cue, that the shoulders have to be just below our ears. So we have to sit quite broad and tall, even when we are sitting in front of a computer. And of course, when we are sitting doing anything in general. Now, household chores is a very vast arena, I should say. And those of us who are working from home, we also work at home. So household chores are also equally important, and we have to have a good posture even when we are doing our household chores. So we have to remember some pointers that we should be pushing things instead of pulling them. So if we want to shift something very heavy, we should be pushing it rather than actually pulling it towards us. We should be going close to things instead of reaching out to them and handling them. Now, this is not possible everywhere, especially when we are in a kitchen setting and we have to handle hot things. So it's not possible everywhere, but of course, wherever it is possible, we should take full benefit of it. And whatever we are working on, those things have to be at our eye level. It may be some vegetables that we are cutting, something that we are going through, or even our mobile phone for that matter. And we should avoid long time bending. So generally for computer users, it's long time sitting that we have to do. But in terms of household chores, we should be avoiding long time standing. Now, like I just mentioned before, that when we remain static, especially when we are working, it becomes like this stagnant water because our joints tend to become stiff, our posture tends to become bad. So I would recommend that every 30 to 45 minutes, we should be changing our position, be it a computer screen or be it, working in the kitchen. If we are on a computer screen, we should stand up, stretch out, relax, look around, relax our eyes. And if we are working in the kitchen, I always have to remind my mom to, sit for some time, sit back, relax, don't stand continuously or, don't roam about here and there continuously. And yeah, of course, I have to remind myself also sometimes. So when we move, we become like this flowing water. When we move, we flow. And so we can have a beautiful and, fit body when we move continuously. Of course, continuously in the sense not that much continuously, but at least every 30 to 45 minutes, we should be changing our positions. Now, my next question is to Niyati. We have discussed about how we can achieve healthy lifestyle and aging gracefully. But a major obstacle to this goal in many elderly is to have a fall. Yes, and unfortunately, we don't fall deliberately, right? We just fall. And falls don't just cause physical problems, they also come with a lot of emotional implications. So we all know as physios that We have many patients after a fall, they are literally afraid even to move and to stand. Some of them become bedridden, which is very sad. And I'm sure none of us would like to ever be dependent on anyone. So, Niyati, can you tell us a few strategies to prevent falls? And just in case a fall happens, how do we manage it? Thank you.
Thank you, Divya, for the question. Now, it is true, falls can occur in any age group. However, the naturally occurring changes in the body due to aging sometimes magnifies the consequences of a fall in elderly. Now, falls impact the overall confidence of an elderly, sometimes due to fear and sometimes due to actual physical disability. Now, fall is also the leading cause of disability in the elderly population. The knowledge of fall prevention and management is a good means to promote healthy aging. Fall prevention can be done in the following methods. Now, the first part, as Dr. Divya mentioned, maintaining a basic strengthening, flexibility and mobility routine, be it using yoga, basic stretches, or any general exercises. Even walking around outside in sunlight would help. The second component is balance training. In balance training, ideally, different surfaces need to be trained under the supervision of a professional. Now, narrow surface, broad surface, and often even eyes closed and eyes open exercises are also given. Another component to fall prevention is if you are prescribed any assistive device like that of rollator, cane or stick, one needs to use it definitely. Another important component that we can use to prevent falls is environmental modification. Now, what can we do to modify environment? So, indoors, if you go to see, you need to have well-lit rooms. Now, well-lit rooms means optimal lighting. The lighting should be neither too bright nor too dull. The same applies for corridors, staircases, and washrooms as well. Another important aspect is installing railing, especially in staircases and washrooms. A busy environment, a cluttered environment indoors is to be avoided. Since there is already less space, one must try to keep the space as clear as possible. Lastly, one must remove any ill-fitting carpets or rugs. Another important aspect of fall prevention is using appropriate footwear. Now, appropriate footwear doesn't necessarily mean expensive or branded. Appropriate footwear is a footwear of the perfect size and fit. It should be neither too light nor too heavy. The footwear should support the individual from all sides of the foot and should not come off while walking. So these are the ways one can prevent fall. Now, unfortunately, in case a fall does occur, one must try to do the difficult task of not panicking. If anybody is around, please call for help and go to the safest place possible. In case you find yourself alone, then what to do? What you can do is drag yourself towards a stable surface. If indoors, it can be anything like a sofa or bed. If you are outside, you can look out for a fixed chair that you can find in the parks, benches, or a sturdy tree to support yourself. In case you find that you cannot move at all and the pain is unbearable, then definitely call for help and go to a nearby emergency room. Now, if you are able to get the necessary help and reach home, definitely clean yourself up either with somebody's assistant or alone so that you can identify if you are in need of help for any minor injury. Now that we have a few pointers about healthy living, let us divert to a new technique in physiotherapy. Dr. Swati Pachi, could you tell us about what dry needling is exactly. Is it painful, and do we need anesthesia for it? Which age groups and conditions can benefit from it? Can it be used in non-operative patients? What are the end goals of this therapy? And if a patient wishes to seek this therapy, what are the qualifications that one needs to look out for in a dry needling practitioner? Swati Bachi?
Okay, yeah. Dry needling is a modern technique which is used by certified physiotherapists. We use very fine hair-like or filiform needles, and these needles are inserted into the muscle through the skin into the muscle to relieve spasms and muscular pains. They are used to treat certain points called trigger points. A trigger point is the most painful part in a muscle, which feels like a knot or a nodule or a taut band. It's called dry needling because no medication is used. These are solid needles, and they could be the length could be between 13 millimeters to 150 millimeters, and the diameter could be anywhere between 0.18 to 0.45 millimeters. They are made of stainless steel. They have a handle and a shaft, and they are used through plastic guided tubes. The part to be treated is cleaned with the help of alcohol swabs, and it's allowed to dry for a minute or two. Then these needles are inserted into the area using rapid movements of the index finger, and it could be inserted at an angle of either 90 degrees or 45 degrees or 15 degrees, depending on the depth of the muscle, how deep the muscle is, or the underlying structures. So if a muscle is deep seated or very thick, we may insert it at an angle of 90 degrees and deeper. If it is a superficial structure to be treated, it's inserted at an angle of 15 degrees. Once inserted, these needles are left in place for about 5 or 10 minutes or up to 30 minutes. While in place, they could be turned, twisted, or flicked to stimulate the muscle and treat other areas of the muscle which may be taut. While removing them, they are removed rapidly, and you keep an alcohol swab ready to gently dab the muscle in case there is slight bleeding, a few drops. It's a very safe technique when it is used with all the necessary precautions, but it cannot be given to all. There are certain conditions in which it is not given or contraindicated, such as active or acute infections, if there are some kind of bleeding disorders where the clotting time is increased. In uncontrolled diabetes, it is not given, especially when the patients are on insulin and still the diabetes is not under control. Because if this has been long standing, then the sensation in the extremities, such as the hands and the feet, are reduced. So we do not risk dry needling in such cases. Also, not given in epilepsy, malignancy, pregnant women, and not given to it's not used on very old or frail patients. Those who are emotionally high strung or recovering from some kind of emotional or mental trauma, it is avoidable. And children below 16 years need the consent of parents. It is used in a wide range of conditions, such as chronic muscle spasms due to faulty posture, and also a stubborn tightness in muscles, often leading to, like a tension headache or a stress headache. The changes that occur in the muscle once these needles are inserted is it elicits a twitch response or a muscular contraction. This sends a signal to the brain, which in turn releases certain pain-relieving neurotransmitters, which leads to a reduction of pain and inflammation. So what a patient experiences when you insert a needle is a sensation of a fine needle prick. When the needle is inserted, there is a twitch and the original pain may be reproduced for a few seconds. Following that, there may be a feeling of lightheadedness or relaxation or a slight drowsiness for some time. Also, there is a slight soreness felt in the area for about 24 hours, followed by relief of pain. So it's never given on 2 consecutive days. You always call the patient one day, do dry needling, and call them after 48 hours if required again, or maybe a longer duration. So when used with precaution, it works wonders. And you need to be a certified dry needling practitioner to practice this safely. So that was the information about dry needling. I hope that has answered all your questions, Niyati.
Thank you for that information on a recent advance, Dr. Swati Pachi. Now moving on to my next question, Dr. Divya, the increase in static positioning and average screen times has significantly increased the complaints like back pain, neck pain, and many other issues. However, is another aspect. How has indoor stay and general restriction affected the overall functioning of the hand? And could you give us some additional ergonomic advice specific to it? Dr. Divya?
Yes, that's very interesting, Niyati, because hand use has always been there. It has now considerably increased, as you said, because of touch screens, because we use a lot of our thumbs for the touch screens. And of course, it was always there when, and it's even there now when, we do things like knitting, stitching, and all the intricate things. So let's review some of the exercises for hand health. Because as you told us, Niyati, it is extremely useful even when we have overuse injuries and also to prevent overuse injuries. So this is the first one, shake it out, because when we use computers for long periods of time, of course, we need to shake out our hands a little to improve the blood circulation. This is very good for the tendons of the hand, like Dr. Niyati was saying, for carpal tunnel syndrome. And even if we don't have carpal tunnel syndrome, this is a very good exercise to prevent it, I can say. But of course, we should be doing all these exercises only if we don't have any alarming pain or tingling or numbness. So that's one of the disclaimers. Thumb touches are also very good to relieve the stiffness in the thumb. This is a very good stretch because, many times we don't work actively with our wrists. We would actually use only our fingers or thumbs, but wrists are the foundations on which, our hands work. So it's very important to even work on our wrists when we are exercising the hands. This is for thumb bending and straightening. Again, a very good exercise for the thumb. Now, this particular thing is done on a table. So when we are sitting on the computer, busy with some work, we cannot stand. I think this is a very good way to stretch it. And of course, we can do this in the air when we are standing, when we are stretching out. This is a very good way also. And ultimately, grip strengthening to avoid the overuse injuries of the hand. So now we saw some, exercises for the hand. But as we all know, our health is in our own hands, right? It's up to us on how to work on our health, how to build our health, and how to lead a very healthy life. So let's make a resolution today. Let's make a sankalpa. Bhavema niramayaha, bhavema sukhinaha. Let's be healthy and let's be happy. Thank you.
Thank you, Divya, for the wonderful information and the additional ergonomic advice specific to our hands, as well as holistic healing. Now, my next question would be to Swati Pachi, continuing in terms of effects of the static positions. So remaining in static positions for hours has given rise to aches and pains, definitely, even in youngsters. Now, there is a common diagnosis and very well-known diagnosis called sciatica. Now, could you explain what is sciatica exactly and also what mimics it? Is there any method to prevent it? And in case one is diagnosed with it, how to approach the treatment? Dr. Swati Pache.
Yeah. Medically, sciatica is a leg pain which is generated by the sciatic nerve and experienced along the course of the sciatic nerve, which is the lower back, the hip, the back of the thigh, and back of the leg. But nowadays, sciatica has become a very broadly used term. We have patients who come to us to the clinic, and any pain that they feel in the back and leg, they call it sciatica. So it's very important to have a proper diagnosis because without a proper diagnosis, we will not be giving them, we will not be following the correct line of treatment for them. So it's very important to identify the cause of this pain that they are experiencing. Now, true sciatica is a very intense pain which is felt along the back, low back, the buttock, the back of the thigh, and back of the leg. There could be a feeling of tingling numbness, pins and needles, weakness, or loss or lack of sensation in the leg. Or it could be a combination of these or all of these. Mostly the causes of true sciatica are tight structures around the sciatic nerve, or a disc bulge, or arthritic changes in the lower spine. But one common exercise which can be taught to these patients is flossing of the sciatic nerve or neural gliding, as you've explained, Niyati. It is a technique where the nerve is moved and stretched gently, and this should give relief of true sciatica, and it should not aggravate the pain. So an important thing to be noted is proper diagnosis. Now, there are different conditions which make joints in the spine. When the facetal joints are injured or irritated in the lower spine, in the lower lumbar spine, pain is experienced around the hip, buttock, or the leg. In such conditions, flexion exercises, that is forward bending of the spine exercises, are encouraged because these open up the facetal joints and relieve pain. So these exercises are taught to the patients, very specific ones. So with these exercises, patients should get relief of pain and again, no aggravation. Then another reason why a patient could feel pain along the back of the leg is dysfunction of the sacroiliac joints. Sacroiliac joints are a pair of small joints in the pelvic ring. Any kind of inflammation or dysfunction here can cause pain on any one side of the hip and radiate down to the lower limb. This also needs a certain specific type of exercises, which are again taught to the patient for relief. Now, another reason why somebody could experience pain in the lower leg could be a referred pain. This is usually felt when the muscles in the low back are in chronic spasm for a prolonged period of time. So this can be referred to the lower limb or the back of the thigh or the back of the lower leg, which can be mistaken for sciatica. Now, such conditions benefit with the help of trigger point therapy, where deep pressure is applied over the muscles in spasm or the trigger points. Dry needling is very useful, or foam rolling of the tight muscles is extremely useful. And another condition in which people experience pain along the back of the leg is intervertebral discs being bulged or damaged or ruptured. IV discs, intervertebral discs, are circular donut-shaped structures which are in between two vertebral bodies. Any kind of bulge, damage, or rupture to the disc can cause pain and irritation in the leg and thigh. In such conditions, extension exercises of the spine, that is the backward movement of the spine, relieves pain. So it's very important to identify the cause of this pain in the leg and not term it loosely as sciatica. And then we can achieve excellent results. There is a rising trend of complaints of dizziness, headache, and imbalance across various age groups. Do you think the increase in screen time and other lifestyle changes have contributed to this? How do we tackle this problem across various age groups? Can it be prevented? When is the correct time to seek help? What is vestibular rehabilitation? Can it help in resolving the issues?
Thank you for the question. As we all know, nowadays everything is digital and very convenient, be it school, job, or even spiritual pursuits. However, every convenience comes with a price. Longer screen times have definitely contributed to the rise of dizziness and vertigo in individuals. Our overall balance is dependent on a coordination and interaction of multiple systems within the body as well as in the external environment. Now, staying indoors and in one place for long periods of time has definitely altered these interactions. One of the most important systems intrinsically is the vestibular system responsible for balance. The one of its components is located in the middle part of the ear. The middle ear has a fluid that flows freely. Now, this fluid contains tiny particles. These particles move whenever the fluid moves, and the fluid basically moves in relation to the head, neck, eyes, and body of the individual. Now, due to any reason, if the movement of this fluid slows down, in relation, the particle movement also slows down, and as a result, one experiences dizziness. Now, vertigo, which is commonly referred by the general population, is positional in origin. Example, after sitting for a long time or lying down for a long time, when one suddenly gets up and experiences dizziness, that is positional vertigo. In an acute onset of vertigo, one may experience excessive unbearable dizziness and sometimes and many times vomiting as well. Now, what to do? In an acute case, one should definitely seek the help of a vestibular team. A vestibular team may involve an ENT, a neurologist, a vestibular or a neurophysiotherapist. Now, vestibular rehabilitation in the simplest terms is retraining of these faulty interactions of the various components of balance system, including but not restricted to the vestibular system. There are a few ways to prevent it. How can they be prevented? The following methods can be used. As Divya mentioned earlier, every 1 or 2 hours take a break. If possible, every 30 minutes. Move away from the screen and move your eyes. The movement of the eyes should be in the following directions: up, down, right, left. These movements should be done slowly, at least 10 to 15 times in one set. Similarly, the neck should be moved in the direction up, down, side, and side. And another component of lateral flexion is added, that is, the ear should touch the tip of the shoulder on both sides. Another progression to this, if one is diagnosed with a vestibular condition, example vertigo, are Branderoff exercises. Branderoff exercises are basically used to habituate your vestibular and balance system. These are basically combinations of the above mentioned eye and neck exercises. Other methods of externally adjusting the balance system is 1. Keeping the lighting of the working environment optimal, that is, not too bright, not too dark, including activities like dribbling of a ball, bouncing ball off the wall and catching it, or catch and throw of the ball in air, all provide good stimulation to the vestibular system. Now, these activities could be done in sitting or standing, However, each component of these activities is important as they target specific areas and alignments of the vestibular system. Especially for children, remember to take frequent breaks, especially while studying, and moving indoors is also important. Other fun activities to train the vestibular system and improve overall health are rebounder exercises and skipping, provided medically allowed. Now, what does one do if one is diagnosed with a vestibular condition? So, therapy involves certain specific guidelines. Now, an individual having dizziness will be taken in certain specific position to retrain the vestibular system. Now, in many cases, these individuals may experience an increase in symptoms. However, it is important to not stop the treatment there and continue till there is a conditioning and retraining of these particular components. Some individuals immediately refer to have some relief. This also occurs, however, it's not very common. But one must know that one must not discontinue any medication or exercises without the direction of the treating doctor. Now, when can one discontinue the exercises? The following guidelines are generally observed. 1. The patient is off any medications for vertigo. 2. An individual has not experienced any symptom for the past 24 to 48 hours while off the medication. Only then will one's therapist recommend to discontinue the medications. Now, many conditions present as vertigo and have a common complaint of dizziness, but there are many underlying origins. One of them is tension headache. Dr. Swati Pachi, could you inform us whether dry needling can be effective in relieving tension headaches? And is it used as a standalone therapy or as an additive one in a larger scheme of things? Now, many conditions present as dizziness but have other origin. One of them is the tension headache. Now, Dr. Swati Pachi, could you tell us if dry needling can be effective in tension headaches, and is it used as a standalone treatment or as an additive one to other techniques? Dr. Swati Pachi.
Tension headaches are caused by issues which are not actually in the head. It is caused by a shortening of muscles around the neck and the base of the skull. They are usually experienced as a dull ache or a sensation of tightness across the forehead or on the sides and the back of the head, neck, and the shoulder muscles. Now, tight muscles develop into painful knots called trigger points, which I explained earlier. And these trigger points can refer pain from the neck to different parts of the head. Mostly, the causes of these tension headaches are general stress and fatigue. It could be due to overall poor posture or constantly sitting at a poorly designed workstation, carrying heavy weights, or carrying your laptop, a heavy laptop in a bag with a shoulder strap, a single shoulder strap, or prolonged sitting in the car while driving. So what happens is, once you have the shortening of these muscles, your neck shifts into a forward head posture. And this causes a pulling at the base of the skull and in the neck. And this is what causes the pain to extend up and around the head, temples, and the forehead. So dry needling can be used either as a standalone treatment or as a supportive treatment for headaches by releasing spasm in those tightened muscles and trigger points. Most of the times it is used as a supportive therapy because the patient has already met the physician and started some other forms of treatment. So most of the times it is used as a supportive therapy. A certified physiotherapist can palpate the base of the skull to look for knots or muscle spasms or trigger points. And these tight muscles are treated with the help of dry needles. So the root cause of these headaches can be eliminated. So its recurrence in the future can be reduced. Frequency of these headaches can be reduced. Along with dry needling, it's also very important to educate the patient about the various causes. So it's important to explain to them how important it is to sleep and wake up at the same time each day, exercise regularly each day for at least 30 minutes, eat regular meals without skipping any meals except especially breakfast. They can also learn some stress management techniques such as yoga, massage, deep breathing, or any other relaxation technique, whatever suits them. And most importantly, do not stop the medication which has been recommended by the physician. So along with all this, if dry needling is used, yes, it is very effective in eliminating the root cause. So I hope I have been able to answer all the questions, Niyati. I would like to ask you a question. We have discussed about improving the quality of life and healthy aging. How do we manage the same among individuals who are recovering from chronic illnesses and those who are bedridden? Niyati, could you
Yes.
enlighten us on that?
Thank you for the question. It's a very important question and very often it is unaddressed. So a significant number of individuals live with chronic illnesses throughout their lives. And these illnesses affect multiple systems in the body, either individually, in combination, or altogether. Now, often chronic illnesses lead to disability affecting their mobility, communication skill, and basically their overall functionality. Now, advancements in technology and modern medicine has ensured a good lifespan for these individuals. However, it is up to us as a part of family, caregiving community, and friend circle, community at large, to ensure good quality of life as well. Now, how can we ensure a good quality of life? First and foremost, we need to prevent certain complications. One of the complications is bed sore. How can we prevent bed sores in chronically ill or bedridden patients? One, recovering individuals highly benefit from a 2-hourly position change. Using of air beds will be beneficial as well to reduce pressure sores. Another important aspect is evening out the crevices and folds on bed sheets and mattresses that directly come into contact with the recovering person. Also, keeping the skin dry and supple is important part of prevention of bed sores. Another important aspect of recovering, helping a person recover, is to attain upright position as medically permitted. Now, upright positioning, be it standing or sitting, it can be supported but has multiple system benefits. It will not only improve the alertness of an individual but also has multi-system benefits, like it will help improve our lung functioning and also fasten recovery. Now, keeping the area or room of the patient clean, well lit, smelling fresh, and with some pleasant music will also have a positive impact. Now, the most profound loss that an individual experiences after a life-altering diagnosis or injury is the dignity of choice. Now, many families attain a certain level of comfort around a fixed routine with caregiving and medical plans. Often, the individual going through it is neglected. It is of the utmost importance that the recovering individual is offered the dignity of consent and choice. Although definitely not feasible at every stage, one could enhance the involvement of the patient in their own care through the following methods. The first one would be to inform the patient about the activity being done. Example, by changing their clothes or giving them medicine, or informing them about changes in treatment or follow-ups. It is especially important to inform and receive consent before having any visitors open at home. The second part is allowing them privacy. Basically, privacy is needed as much as possible during activities of daily living. Example, when you're changing their clothes or cleaning them up. Another important aspect is if a person is unconscious, treat them as a conscious person and inform them and seek consents of things similar to how you would talk to a normal individual, a awake individual. The next part is giving them a choice to select clothing options, music, and decor in the room. Basically, anything that increases their involvement in their daily life. Lastly, slowly introduce them to some activity in a modified way that is similar to what they enjoyed previously. In a modified way, because we don't want them to be overwhelmed, and slowly get them to what they enjoy the most. Now, contributing to their personal care is a very essential part of recovery, and making that possible will ensure not just a long life for these individuals, but a purposeful one as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Niyati. That was very good information. Thank you.
Now, this was our humble attempt to cover a diverse bunch of topics that may be useful to different groups in the present times. However, for want of time, we have to conclude this session now. I would like to thank our panelists, Dr. Swati Putli and Dr. Divya Bizur, for sharing their valuable information and time with us. I would like to convey my deep gratitude to Param Pujya Sadhujat Shankarashram Swamiji for the opportunity to reach out to the community. My heartfelt thanks to the SCM and the Sayujam team for organizing this webinar. Thank you to the audience for your patient listening. I will now conclude by chanting the Sabha Samapti Prarthana. Om Nandantu Sadhaka Sarve Vinashyantu Vidhushaka Avastha Shambhavi Mestu Prasannostu Guru Sada Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschit Dukkham Apnuyat. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.